Our next speaker truly needs no introduction, but in case you've been living in the vanishing cabinet for the last few years, Dr. Brent Satterly of Widener University and Professor CJ Umbridge will be presenting for us. Oh, this really does move. Will be speaking to us today on him. And thank you. Let's welcome Dr. Satterly.
Greetings! Ahem. Greetings! Oh, thank you. Hello, Harry Potter fandom. My name is Dr. Brent Satterly. My students call me Dr. Brent, but frankly, a lot of my queen friends and sisters just call me Clitty. And that's my name, because officially, my name is Professor Dolores J. Umbridge, and that is my name. And yes, my name is rather, irreverent and kind of questioning, much like drag, and in many ways, much like students at Hogwarts. Before we get started, I want to do two things. One is I would like to, similar to my colleague, content warning, a land acknowledgement, and a labor acknowledgement. I think these things are important. I am not shying away from talking about politics today, because when we shy away from talking about politics, then we give up our power. And we don't have an opportunity to speak to truth to power. And one of the wonderful things I absolutely love about academia is being able to speak truth to power and still have tenure. Yay! Oh, yes, oh, yes. I know, thank you, oh, thank you, I know, right? So, a labor acknowledgement, land acknowledgement. Chestnut Hill is located, as I mentioned, in the northwestern edge of Philadelphia, overlooking the Wissahickon Creek, stewarded by land by the Lenape people, also known as Lenapehoking. And I just want to take a moment because I think it's really important. Land acknowledgements are often just lip service, and we need to do more than that. It's not enough. The land back movement actually is really exceptional in proposing things like a voluntary institutional land tax, as well as having, I will tell you that I'm advocating for a member of our board of trustees to permanently be a member of the Lenape tribe. We'll see if that happens, but there's a lot more that we can do, but ultimately what it comes down to is building relationships with the tribal people. In addition, I also want to acknowledge that the United States of America built its wealth on the backs of black and brown people as after trying to pretty much eliminate an entire indigenous people. I say all those things because they need to be said. They need to be said. I am a social worker. I'm also a Gryffindor with a Hufflepuff heart and a tad bit of Slytherin, obviously. So, but I do like to talk a little bit about, we're going to be talking about politics, and I also want you to know that I am unapologetically authentic as much as possible. And one of the reasons I do that is because I'm queer. I know you're shocked. I know. Clutch my pearls. I know you're shocked. The reason being is, the idea that I share this with you is because much of my life I had to hide. I am proudly a Gen Xer, 53, right? And I grew up as a small sissy boy, as a gay boy in rural Pennsylvania in the age of AIDS, where the only access to information that I had was the 3 channels that we got on our TV, which was a big giant behemoth of a thing that you had to get up and change the channel. Anybody remember UHF? Come on, UHFers. Yeah, that's right. Old. And basically what that was about was also looking at trying to find information, access Like I had TV, 3 stations, the local newspaper, and what was in the Encyclopedia Britannica in the corner. Literally, that was it. And so I find having access to so much information both overwhelming and empowering, and frankly, pretty frightening. And I think that's an important piece. The second thing is, for the last couple of years, I have done presentations at this conference, and in particular last year was really emotional for me. In my presentation, it was about my own recovery and the role that the Harry Potter conferences have played in my own healing journey. And guess what, folks? Progress, not perfection. We don't have to get it perfect. We don't have to have the ultimate answer to the author, right? And how to navigate the horrors of transphobia that continue to fall out of her foul mouth. And I think that is incredibly problematic, and I can't even begin to tell you how many of my queer siblings have been so deeply wounded by that experience, and I am privileged and honored to be able to hold them tight. And to do that, and so it's one of the reasons why I want to give this talk today, because so many of the lies that are being spewed by presidential candidate Donald Trump are directly targeting trans people. And so it's really absolutely critical. I also will acknowledge not being neutral. Neutrality sides the form of the oppressor. And the experience of neutrality in my field of social work, anybody here ever heard the term therapeutic objectivity? Yeah, I don't believe it exists, because we all grew up deep in our cultural saturation stories. I grew up in my shoes. These awesome Mary Janes, aren't they great? But the idea is that our cultural scripts shape us, our belief systems, and some of the only ways that we can explore them is through critical thinking. And delicious reading. Read every book you can get your hands on. And with that, we're going to get started. So first of all, who is this cute boy? I am serving you some Gen X realness because I think it's critical, and because I'm a narcissist. I want to make sure to tell you a little bit about my social positionality. I'm a white, cisgender, able-bodied, gay, femme, male. Shout out to my sissy boy sisters out there. I consider myself culturally humble life learner and leaning towards justice. And I find that is always an ever-revealing personal and professional process, and those two experiences are intertwined. At Widener University, I have the honor and privilege of being a full professor with tenure. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a husband of 31 years. We just celebrated 2 days ago. I know, 31 years, right? 31 years, that's like 60 in gay years, just so you know. Just so you know. So I'm a son, an uncle, and a brother. I will tell you that just out of pride, we will get to the topic, I promise, during COVID, my nephew had his daughter, and she was born with Downs and with leukemia. That shattered us, and I didn't get to meet her until she was like 2.5 because of COVID. And the first time I met her, she got out of the car with her mom, and she was holding a rainbow flag, and she was like, "Uncle Brent," you know, this, that, and I was like, "I will die for you," like whatever you want, kind of thing. So I have stake in this game. Like, I have stake in what's going to happen for generations down the road, and I also attribute that to the 7-generational ideology of indigenous people. Being able to look back 7 generations and say, what can I learn from those generations? And being able to look ahead 7 generations and say, what can I do to honor and help them? And that takes me out of the smallness of me and puts me into the bigness of our peoples, past, present, and future. I'm a U.S. American citizen. I'm a Gryffindor with a puff heart and a drag queen who's also a Slytherin. Here's my little Gryffindor self hanging out in my garden because I like to garden, because gays like to garden. And there's Clitoris. All right, so here we go. So, Professor Umbridge, who is she? Come in. Well, her history sets the whole stage for where her own prejudice and bigotry come from, and I will say, as a social worker and a clinician and a family therapist, where her wounds come from. Because that's what this is all about. This is all about pain. This is all about woundedness. And it's so much easier to other folks who behave badly because they're evil. And I'm going to say, they're hurt. And it helps me deal with my rage at the author because I think she's hurt. Doesn't make it okay. Doesn't condone bad behavior. But it gives me a framework and a tool to be able to figure out how to navigate not letting people who behave badly squat inside me like a toad. It helps me let go. Doesn't mean I'm not going to fight like hell for justice, but it helps them not take up space in my head. That also works well with family, by the way, just so you know. And speaking of family, her family, she liked to say she was a pureblood, right? What was she? Half-blood. Yeah, she was a half-blood. But she lied about that. She had a brother who was a squib, a mother who was a rhymes with schmuggle. Muggle, yeah, you got it. And a father who was a witch. And I think that's really important. Her whole life was based on a lie in order to feel a sense of worth. In the ministry, she got to assume a position of power. She worked her way up and donned the cloak of authority and power and wielded it with unrelenting viciousness. And she did so in the name of justice. Lies. And finally at Hogwarts, I mean, come on. She had an agenda, right? And that agenda was not in the interests of the students, despite what she said. Lies! I'm sorry, Lori Kim said earlier, we get to see pictures of kittens on Trump when he shows up. I apologize for not giving you a content warning about that. There will be one more image of Trump, but I have to say, I think she looks much better. So, with that, we're going to do a little bit of a comparative analysis. The concept of they don't hesitate to use violence. Neither Trump nor Umbridge hesitate to use violence. For example, January 6th. January 6th. That's just one example. That's before we talk about things like the Muslim ban, the anti-trans bills. Did you know that there are over 500 anti-LGBTQIA plus bills currently in 2024 sitting on the halls of state legislatures around the country? 500. 500 plus. For Umbridge, detention. She clearly liked to use violence in that context, right? She enjoyed hurting students. There's what we call, in clinical terms, sociopathy. The idea of, not that people will often frame like, you're a psychopath, which is kind of a layperson's term, which is really about, I'm going to hurt you, and I don't know what's right from wrong. Right? Whereas a sociopath, again a layperson's term, is more so in the context of, I know this hurts you, I know this is wrong, I don't care. And if that doesn't chill your bones, you're not listening to me. Invalidate dissenters and control the media. Trump invokes fake news. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant sociological tool by which to sow distrust in the public in standard, in what would be considered often, mainstream media news like NBC, CNN, and all that kind of stuff. And anytime there's any kind of news reported or academic studies reported or anything of that nature, all you have to say is, it's fake news. And it gives people a psychological out of that inconvenient truth. I don't have to believe this. This isn't true. Umbridge attempted to expel Harry from Hogwarts after she sent the Dementors to kill him in Order of the Phoenix. You read the Order of the Phoenix, right? Say yes. Okay. So they both abused executive power. Trump fired people and issued executive orders that harmed people profusely. I don't know if y'all know this, but Trump regularly has said in his rallies that he's going to be doing a whole lot of things, being a dictator on day one. If you've ever heard of this little thing called Project 2025, I highly recommend that you read it, because it is a love letter to fascism and Christian nationalism. And it is incredibly frightening. And if you don't think that that is Trump's agenda, I'm afraid you're kidding yourself. Because a lot of what that is about is power. A lot of that is about longing for power and someone who is wounded and wants to heal that wound by filling it with power. I heard a story on NPR yesterday, which was pretty terrifying. The notion that the things that he has said he will do are often not believed by the supporters, by his supporters. And in the way that they do, and that they do psychological defense mechanisms and do a lot of mental gymnastics, they'll say, well, it didn't happen in the first term, so it's certainly not going to happen now. He's just blustering. It's fine. And the difference is the people who worked with him in the first term are the ones who are saying, no, 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 it was us, the military generals, the secretary, the people on staff who were saying, we were able to barely keep him in the rails, and all of us have been fired. And he will do what he says he's going to do. And Umbridge, of course, issued decrees like nobody's business. And she loved punishments, something even as basic as, the dissolving of any student organizations, especially that jockey one called Quidditch. And finally, loved humiliating others. Trump, just from very early on in the first the campaign run, he mocked a reporter with disabilities. And it was lauded by his supporters that was great. It was wonderful. And I think that's incredibly horrific, because that's just, again, a small example of that. And of course, Umbridge, look at what she did to both Flitwick and Professor Trelawney. Their mockery, shaming them, public humiliation. These kinds of things are a big part of their menu. Lies, right? So if we look at the role of family, the notion of her blood, which she called pure but really wasn't, the idea of what it was to have a squib in the family, and the two primary psychological defense mechanisms known as denial and compartmentalization. Denial being the refusal to acknowledge and believe a truth, and compartmentalization is you create a whole bunch of little teeny tiny boxes that you keep separate in your brain, and you don't have to have them interact at all. You could just turn one off and turn another on, and that's fine. And we know that, and it's all connected and supported by the notion of self-loathing. In the ministry, she used the Dementor attacks was an object lesson of how she lied directly to the entire ministry and Wizengamut at the time. You notice how I really went over that fast because I can never say Wizengamut. And finally at Hogwarts, what her purpose was, what her roles were, and ultimately what her agenda was. Lies. There's that other one. Ooh. Ooh. I'm so offended for myself. So a reflection of the Umbridge psyche is pretty considerable. Look at some of the lies that we have been able to note. And I have lots and lots of support for all of these and fact-checked. Around the rally crowd sizes, something to do with sizes, Obama said, you know, I don't know. And woo, okay. And the current state of the economy, right? And the threat of immigrants. Anybody see that debate with the whole folks that it was Haitian immigrants who were eating cats and dogs in Ohio? And you know, the crazy thing is we can laugh, but it spurred hate crimes in Ohio. Like, it's pretty horrific that that kind of power is wielded in that verbiage. And of course, the big lie that Trump actually won the 2020 election. Again, these have been fact-checked, these have been reviewed by numerous courts and numerous investigations, and all found to be lies. Over 30,000 lies were recorded by the Washington Post in his first 4 years in his administration. 30,000! 30,000! That's a lot. That's a lot. His recent stump speeching invoked lies, FEMA, and the lack of support for the folks in hurricane disasters and hurricane relief, the role of migrants all throughout the country, and the absolutely horrific racism invoking by blaming migrants for crimes, they're going to come and get you kind of thing. And when he says things like that, he's talking to white people. Like, let's name that. Like, there's white supremacy all over this. And ultimately, of course, things like your kids are going to go to school and they'll get surgery at school to transition as trans. Like hormone treatments. I'm like, what schools have that kind of budget? Seriously. I know Widener doesn't. I don't think Chestnut Hill does. Shush. The sale of menstrual products? I'm like, I wish that more menstrual products were available for all of our students in schools for free, all over the place, contraceptive technology, all of it. And finally, that the Supreme Court was being expanded by like 14 new justices. I mean, these lies may seem silly to you based on your hearing, but the piece that's different, though, is that it serves as a big distraction from running from one lie to the next lie to the next lie to the next lie, all the while folks are doing things like trying to go to different legislators throughout the country to shift and change things like, remember in the 2020 election with the fake electors? That, which is currently now as part of the charges that the DA is bringing against Trump. So it's very frightening, and it is a sophisticated process. It's a specter of dis and misinformation. It involves pathological grouping and the concept of othering, that is Michelle Fine's framework, and putting neighbor against neighbor. Those people over there, I define myself by not being them. And they must be evil, they must be out to get me, they must not have my interests at heart, I can't trust them, all the things, right? The conspiracy of silence is so profound that you don't want to say anything because you might be next on the list. And one of the things that Trump has said is he's going to use the National Guard as a police force and get back at people who speak out against him. I hope I'm on that list. And I hope you are too. And ultimately, it's the kind of fascist beliefs and processes and, sadly, silence of the populace that led up to both wizarding wars. That's part of the experience. Logic to convince, rhetoric to persuade. And that is one of the primary calls of teachers, is to help people think critically, question your sources, check, double check, triple check your sources, and all of those kinds of things. I'm almost done. There are two Hogwarts movements that I thought are really important with regard to resistance, because we're not all going to talk about, oh, woe, it's me, right? And one, of course, is Dumbledore's army. It echoed the Order of the Phoenix, and it was not a faculty-inspired committee, But no, it was a student-led underground movement. How awesome is that? See what I did there? I both invoked that, and I also, did, from a popular singing movie. Awesome. Okay, and there's a focus on defense and protection in Order of the Phoenix, and the room of requirement, creating safe spaces and voices, and not just physical space, although that's important, but connections in that we're not alone, and the notion of camaraderie as part of that process. And the other, believe it or not, might sound silly, but it's not. It was huge. The Weasley Wildfire Whiz-Bang Rebellion! Yeah, let's hear it for the Weasleys! And that for you. All right, public resistance, despite the risk of very real consequences. They figured they would get expelled. They were like, nah, we're going to go open up a joke shop. You know why? Because we got money from Harry, and we want out of here, and we don't have to sit through this. They were granted, and what they did in that process was grant permission to other people to resist, especially the faculty. The faculty were the ones who were frightened and silent and like, oh, I can't believe this woman is coming into my room and observing me. I mean, like, get the hell out of my classroom. Yeah, I know, I swear. Sorry, Zoomland or whatever, but it's just true. And finally, it's a public denial of Umbridge power. And that is how we speak the truth. Through coalitions, building relationships with people who are different than you, who can work toward that common goal of liberation, not just justice. Liberation, not just justice. So learn your lessons. And the great thing is, trust the room, trust the space, trust the magic of the people who are in it, and call upon the characteristics of the 4 different houses: courage to speak up, resourcefulness to organize, patience to wait, and wisdom to act. We need all 4 houses in this resistance. It is not owned by anyone but the collective us. Remember, bullies fall when we act. And him! Mischief managed. Thank you very much.